What if I told you that no matter how many big news stories, scandals, or heartbreaks come and go, some love stories in Hollywood would never really go away? Yeah, I'm talking about Johnny Depp. If you've been keeping up with his story lately, the drama, the court cases, all the rumors, you're definitely not alone. It feels like everywhere you look, there's another update, another opinion, another argument about his life. It's almost like watching a movie that just keeps going and going. But here's the thing most people never really think about. Behind all that craziness, behind the news stories and the viral videos, there's a quieter story, a more personal one. It's not just about being famous or all the drama. It's about love, loss, and feelings that don't just go away with time. So the real question is, does Johnny Depp still hold on to a love that never goes away? And once you really start looking at his life, you realize this isn't just a celebrity story anymore. It becomes something a lot more relatable, something that feels very human. Let's slow things down and go back to where it all started. Before the drama, before the courtroom battles, Johnny Depp had already built a name for himself not just as a really good actor, but as someone who loved deeply. He wasn't known for shallow relationships or short flings. When he cared about someone, he really, truly cared. And one of the earliest examples of that was his relationship with Winona Ryder. If you remember the 90s, you know how huge that relationship was. It wasn't just another Hollywood couple. It felt intense, real, almost like something out of a romantic movie. And then there was the tattoo, Winona Forever. Now think about that for a second. Getting a tattoo for someone is already a really big deal. But forever? That says a lot about how he felt at the time. It shows how deeply he believed in that connection. Of course, like many young relationships, it didn't last forever. They went their separate ways. Life moved on. But feelings like that don't just disappear. They leave behind something, a memory, a feeling, a part of who you become. And that's something you start to notice about Johnny Depp's life. He doesn't just move on like nothing happened. He carries pieces of those relationships with him. Then came a totally different part of his life. A calmer one, a more settled one. His relationship with Vanessa Paradis. This wasn't about flashy headlines or dramatic moments. It was quiet, stable, real. They were together for over 10 years. Think about that in Hollywood terms. That's really rare. They built a life together away from the cameras and the spotlight. They had 2 kids. They created something that looked less like a celebrity relationship and more like a real family. For many people watching from the outside, it felt like Johnny had finally found something that would last, something that wasn't going to go away. And honestly, it looked that way for a long time. But then things changed. And what makes this part of the story so interesting is how quiet it was. There was no big scandal, no huge breakup, no dramatic accusations. They simply split up. And sometimes those are the hardest endings to understand because when there's no clear reason, no single moment you can point to, it leaves behind a different kind of feeling. It leaves behind questions. It leaves behind what-ifs. And most importantly, it often leaves behind feelings that never fully go away. If you've ever gone through something like that, you know exactly what it feels like. A relationship ends, but a part of it stays with you. Not in a painful, overwhelming way, but in a quiet, lasting way. Now, let's move forward to one of the most talked about parts of his life, his relationship with Amber Heard. This is where everything changed. Unlike his past relationships, this one played out in front of the whole world. It wasn't private. It wasn't quiet. It was intense, emotional, and eventually very public. We all saw how things went down. The fights, the accusations, the news coverage, and then came the Depp versus Heard trial. This wasn't just a celebrity case. It became a huge worldwide event. People from all over the world followed every detail, every statement, every single moment. And through all of that, Johnny Depp wasn't just going through a breakup. He was dealing with something much bigger. People judging him, emotional stress, and personal stuff being shown to the whole world in a way that very few people ever go through. Now, stop for a second and think about that. Imagine going through one of the hardest times in your life and having the whole world watching it happen. That kind of experience changes you. It changes how you see people. It changes how much you trust others. And it definitely changes how you think about love going forward. So when everything settled down, when the headlines slowed and the trial ended, many people expected one thing: a fresh start, a new relationship, a new chapter. But that's not what happened. Instead, Johnny Depp stepped back. No big romantic announcements, no confirmed long-term partner, just silence when it comes to his love life. And that made people really curious. Why didn't he move on the way everyone expected him to? Why didn't he jump into something new? Some people think the answer is simple, because not all love stories truly end. Some just stay with you. Think about your own life for a second. Is there someone you once cared about a lot who still crosses your mind sometimes? Not in a way that holds you back, but in a way that reminds you of what you felt. That's the kind of deep feelings people think Johnny Depp has when it comes to love. He's never talked about love as something casual. In fact, in past interviews, he's talked about it in a really thoughtful way. He sees love as something rare, something meaningful, something you don't just replace like it's nothing. And when you look at his past relationships, that way of thinking starts to make a lot of sense. Each one wasn't just a moment in time. It was a chapter that shaped who he became. And maybe that's why even today he hasn't rushed into something new. Instead, he's been focusing on himself, his music, his art, his personal growth. He's been spending time doing things that make him feel at peace. And after everything he's been through, that feels like a very purposeful choice. Some fans even believe that his greatest love story isn't about who he's with right now. It's about the connections he's already had, the people who changed him, the relationships that left a lasting mark. And when you start looking at it that way, the story becomes less about finding someone new and more about understanding what he's already been through. Here's something that often gets missed. People who know Johnny Depp or have worked closely with him often describe him as someone who forms very deep emotional connections. He doesn't do things halfway. When he cares fully. And that kind of personality doesn't just turn off after a breakup. It carries forward. It grows. It becomes part of who you are. That's one of the reasons why many people think his connection with Vanessa Paradis still holds a special place in his heart. Not as an ongoing relationship, but as something meaningful that still lives inside him. At the same time, there's another important thing to think about. Johnny Depp has become much more private. After everything that happened out in the open, it's clear that he really values his personal space now more than ever. And that includes his relationships. It's very possible that if there is someone in his life, he's choosing to keep it out of the news, to protect it, to keep it real. Because when your past relationships have been turned into worldwide headlines, it makes sense to want something different next time. Something quieter, something that belongs only to you. There have also been little hints that he might open up more in the future. Not about drama or controversy, but about his emotional journey, what he's learned, how he's changed, what love means to him now. And if that happens, it could give people a whole new way of seeing things. So when we come back to that original question, is there a love that never goes away? Maybe the answer isn't about one specific person. Maybe it's about something deeper. Maybe it's about the way Johnny Depp experiences love, deeply, honestly, completely, and sometimes permanently. Because for some people, love doesn't just end when a relationship does. It changes. It grows into something different, but it never fully disappears. And maybe that's what makes his story so interesting. It's not just about who he's been with. It's about how those relationships keep living inside him, how they shape the way he sees the world, how they affect the choices he makes today. And in a strange way, that makes his story very relatable. Because at the end of the day, this isn't just about a Hollywood star. It's about something we all understand. Holding on to feelings, remembering connections, and sometimes carrying a love that never truly goes away. So, now I want to ask you something. Do you think Johnny Depp still holds on to a past love in some way? Or do you think he's simply choosing to stay private and focus on himself after everything he's been through? There's no right or wrong answer here. Everyone sees it differently. And that's what makes this conversation so interesting. If you have a thought, go ahead and share it, because sometimes hearing different points of view helps us understand the story even better. And if you're curious about what might happen next in his life, especially when it comes to relationships, there's still a lot to explore. There are predictions, rumors, possibilities that could unfold in ways no one expects. So, if you want to stay updated on all of that, make sure you check out the next video, because this story, it's not over yet. And honestly, it might just be starting a whole new chapter. If you enjoyed this, don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and stick around. Because when it comes to stories like this, there's always something deeper waiting to be discovered.